Mwalimu Kinyua Njuguna. He's joining us for the first time on Biashara Tuesday to give us an outlook of what we can expect in the coming few weeks in the economy, but also what kind of questions we should be asking ourselves in terms of the state of the nation, both citizens and the leaders. There are a lot of events which have been brewing up for the past few weeks, from protests to the Finance Act to others which we will be actually touching on here this morning. We have the Standard, the Daily Nation, and the Business Daily with us. But before we get into that whole discussion, let me just go through what the headlines have for us, beginning with the Standard. On top there, pressure mounts on Uhuru of Azimio protests. Security chiefs have been tasked to investigate the ongoing demonstrations, with allegations that former President Uhuru Kenyatta could be at the center of resource mobilization. There's a picture there of ODM Secretary General Edwin Sifuna addressing the press yesterday, where he claimed there was a plan by the government to harm Azimio leaders during the demonstration. This, of course, happened at that parliamentary group meeting by leaders or members of parliament from the side of Azimio La Umoja One Kenya coalition party. So pressure mounts on former President Uhuru Kenyatta over this Azimio protest, given that he is also a principal in that coalition party. That's what the Standard is prioritizing. But on top of that, they've squeezed a few stories which you can find on other pages this morning. Teen crisis report is there on page 3. Millions of teenagers are smoking, drinking, and skipping school. So here we have a teacher this morning. It's going to be an interesting discussion to see how we can solve this crisis of teenagers in this kind of report, which also details what percentage of these teenagers are involved in the abuse of alcohol, number of adolescents who are abusing marijuana at the time of this survey, and much more on depression and anxiety as a result. Russia ends a UN-backed grain deal. So that's a conversation on the bread basket. Agriculture is also going to be a conversation we're having here this morning. And then at the sport pages this morning, you can find a conversation there on the new football kings. And these are all coming from the western side. We'll get to maybe have a look at that, but mostly the stories that I've already talked about on politics and the teenage crisis. The Daily Nation has their memo. The page 1 comment is a memo which was also there in their bulletin last night on the primetime news. Enough is enough. Nobody knows for sure whether the country will hold together or break apart should anti-government demonstrations, which are planned for tomorrow through to Friday, take place. More than 50 million Kenyans are also waiting with bated breath to see what President William Ruto and opposition chief Raila Odinga will do in addressing this stalemate that is highly anticipated in the Republic, and of course has raised concerns across the globe, where the United Nations has also issued a statement decrying the abuse of human rights in the hands of police officers in this protest. We're also going to speak about that in the State of the Nation. That is the role of police officers in this kinds of demonstrations. There also on the back page you get the probe into NHIF. The National Assembly has now launched a public inquiry into fraudulent payments of medical claims and irregular tendering processes at NHIF, and members of the public are invited to submit their memoranda to Parliament all the way up until Friday. Nakumicha, that is the CS Health, is now under fire in the courts, as a Nakuru doctor has now filed a case against her, accusing her of promoting junior officials to senior management positions in that ministry. At the bottom, there's a squeeze on page 29 that you can get to read. Fresh hope for Kenyan farmers or Kenyan tea pickers in compensation fight with Finlays. That is, over 2,000 workers are now getting to secure or have now been allowed to take this petition for a case in the UK. And of course, this is going to spell good news in compensation. And we'll also get to hear from Mwalimu on what the agriculture sector is doing in the Republic, and also have a very focused look at the Mount Kenya region. Before I get ahead of myself, let me introduce our guest of the day, Mwalimu Kinyua Njuguna. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is my first time being in this particular show. And I'm so excited to be here.
Right.
Yes.
Mwalimu, welcome. And maybe we can get a background of You're a teacher of, or a teacher at which institution?
Okay. Currently, I'm not a practicing teacher. I used to be a teacher at Nova Pioneer, and then I joined politics, and then here we are.
Right.
Yes.
You're a seasoned political analyst, and that's why we are glad to have you this morning.
Thank you.
And as you've heard, there are some stories which are, also touching on academia, and
Yes.
we'll get to take a look at it. Maybe we begin with a general view from your side, Mwalimu, where you're seated.
Yes.
What is the state of the nation at the moment? What should we be telling a Kenyan who's watching us? Do we have a pessimistic outlook, or is there a future in the direction the state is heading?
Of course, just as you have put it, Kenyans are between a hard and a rock place, owing to the hard economic times, the lack of jobs for the youth, and then, of course, the salaries that have so much been slashed by the high taxes, and, of course, the high cost of basic commodities, from petrol to foodstuff, all that is leaves Kenyans at a very difficult position. So in my view, we have a very pessimistic situation as we speak in the country. And not unless the government acts and do something to mitigate the situation, we are going to be in a very difficult situation.
Right.
Yes.
The Daily Nation calls it, or in their memo, which is addressing President William Ruto and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, they're saying enough is enough.
Yes.
And at this point, it doesn't matter who has the legal or moral high ground. Do you feel like enough is enough at this point? And what should these two co-principals, who are now holding the fate of the nation in their hands, Azimio leader Raila Odinga, President William Ruto, who have now put their feet down on these planned protests, which are beginning tomorrow. So there's that Finance Act from last week, which is informing the high cost of living that Prime Minister Raila Odinga, or former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, is pointing out. Is enough at this point, Mwalimu?
Richard, just to mention that two wrongs do not make a right. We are in a situation whereby the two topmost leaders, that is the president and the former prime minister, need to come off their high horses and just listen to what Kenyans are telling them. Because what you are seeing is the chest dumping and the bravado that is so common to those people who are in power. Because once the people who are being led tells you that you have a problem in this area, and then you assume and you ignore everything that you promised them while you are campaigning and while you are looking for power, that amounts to trapping of power. And then that is why you are fighting the people in, for us who are in Azimio, we are pushing and hoping that this government could just listen. Yes.
Right. Is it possible for us to carry out our daily activities without disruption? I know we are talking about constitutional rights as well when we get to these kinds of discussion.
Yes.
There's that right to protest, right to demonstrate, right to picket, which is provided by the Constitution. But also there's a right for protection from the government's side. Is it possible for the rest of Kenyans to continue with their activities while the political the political side of the state continues also, if it's a fight for the common mwananchi's rights by the opposition, or if it's a counter reaction from the government? Is it possible for that to happen without us seeing a shutdown? Because what is expected from Wednesday all the way through to Friday is that most businesses will not open, most children will likely not go to school, and the economy will come to a standstill. There's paralyzing of activity. Is it possible for that not to be the case, Mwalimu?
You know, Richard, one thing, suppressing ideas does not make them to run away. The fact that the government is running away from the high cost of living, the high taxes, it does not want to listen and take action. It will not make Kenyans to stop thinking and stop acting and to do something, to go on the street and protest. So at this point, what I would like to say, it is now up to those people who have power, because to whom much is given, much is expected. We expect the government to be discussing about how it is going to lower the cost of living, how it is going to create opportunities for the youth, how it is going to increase salaries for those who are working, and how it is going to create a conducive environment for business and people and investors so that we can spur the economy. But what we are seeing is a regime that is determined to arrest the voices of dissent, a regime that is determined to create divisions within the common people, because we saw the other day when the president called the Kenya Kwanza parliamentarians, and instead of discussing how they are going to solve the crisis, which is the economic crisis which is in the country, we saw that they were being funded, being guided on how they are going to suppress people or the Kenyans who are demanding for jobs. Kenyans who are demanding for lowering the cost of living on Wednesday or on Thursday or on Friday. Of course, that is a failure of leadership. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So there's a need for leadership to be addressing the issues.
Yes, we are lacking leadership in the country, both in the government and to some extent in from our side in Azimio.
Right.
Yes.
The country's fate is now in the hands of 5 men, and that's according to what the nation has here on page 4 and page 5. The opposition and the government are on a collision course ahead of this 3-day protest beginning tomorrow. All eyes will be on Ruto, Raila, Kindiki, Koome and Haji. So those are the 5 people who are going to be very key in these deliberations. National Intelligence Service Director General also Nordin Haji there, as I've mentioned. National Police Service Inspector General Japhet Koome, Interior Cabinet Secretary Professor Kithure Kindiki, President William Ruto, and Chief of the Opposition Raila Odinga. At what point, speaking from the side of the opposition now,
yes,
at what point does it become a fight of the people and not a fight by or for Azimio?
Okay, Richard, there is one thing that we are getting wrong, and that is making this whole issue to be about the former Prime Minister. It is not about Raila. It is about the ordinary Kenyans. And then we have to go back and ask ourselves how we got ourselves into this kind of a situation. You remember the person who is the president today was the second in command.
Yeah.
So he cannot in any way run away from the failures of the former Jubilee government. And then we have also to remind our fellow citizens the role of a government. The role of government is to provide. The role of government is to create opportunities. The role of government is to, provide the necessary infrastructure so that we can, grow the economy, so that we can have people who want to invest come in the country to create a conducive environment for business. But now what we are seeing in government is very quick to appoint, a bloated executive where we have more than the required PSs. You saw the other day our courts, saying that the CAS's positions are unconstitutional. So it is important we remind the people in everyday conversation that the role of government is to protect the most vulnerable people, ensure that there is education, ensure that there is health. That is the role of the government. So when we are seeing the kind of things that we are seeing, that is diversionary tactic, so that the government can run away from its core mandate of protecting the citizens and ensuring that the country moves forward. And that is why you are seeing every day from the government side, they keep on pointing fingers, they keep on shifting blame to the opposition and to the former president. Why? Because they have failed in their leadership role.
Right.
Yes.
Now, when we're talking about the role of government,
yes,
I think let's also speak about the role of the opposition just a bit there.
Yes.
The CS Interior
yes,
is concerned that the opposition is using tactics which are not very favorable to the economy.
Yes, yes.
So the role of the opposition is not to paralyze operations in the Republic, which means we do not need a shutdown of business between Wednesday and Friday. Those are 3 days that will lead to loss of lives or loss of property and loss of business as well. How can we, Mwalimu, ask direct questions? When I began this show, I pointed out the fact that, when we speak about the whole high cost of living, they sound like buzzwords these days. But we take a look at very important details and very specific details. For example, if you're speaking about price of unga going up, we're speaking about either by 100 bob, by 50 bob, and then you add another fuel by 10 shillings, you add 50 shillings here and there. And there's that Kenyan who's doing mjengo, and they get 500 shillings, 700 shillings. If you compute this, at the end of the month, they do not have enough to even survive through the economy, which is a very good, a very good concern, which is being raised by the opposition and, on behalf of Kenyans. But is it possible for the opposition to take up its role without heading towards the direction of paralyzing operations?
Okay, I would just like to begin by pointing out on the roles of opposition, because it is good when we are in such a platform to tell Kenyans that actually the opposition does not control any resources. It is the government that collects taxes. It is the government that allocates the resources. So the work of opposition as a government in waiting, it is to point out and criticize the government when it fails, and at the same time to applaud the government and support its effort when it's doing the right thing. But now when you come to our situation in our country, Kenya, what is the government doing? The government began by appointing the president, friends, and his cronies to very important position in the government. Because when you are looking at the appointments of this KK regime, it leaves you wondering, which kind of country are we in? Which direction are we taking as a country? Because we have to look at the critical sectors of the government, the education, health, and economy, roads and transport. All these people who have been appointed or given this a serious seat, these are politicians. And what the Constitution says, or what the Constitution was stipulating, is that these positions are going to be given to technocrats, to people who are not politicians. And that is why you find that in every move the government is making is failing. Then come to the second issue of the government expenses, because there are some things that the government could do. Like, for instance, the government could reduce on its expenses. We are seeing every day when there is public holidays and national celebrations, we are seeing officials of the government flying all over and then using the, what do you call them, the fuel gasolers and the big machines, so that you may be confused when you go attending a public holiday, whether you are in a car bazaar or you are in a, what the leaders are doing in the country does not reflect what the citizens are undergoing. And that is why we have to keep on educating and creating a lot of awareness to our people that the country is headed in the wrong direction. And it is ignorant to expect that the government is going to change and our livelihoods are going to improve, because the government is moving in an opposite direction. Then when you come to the other issue of, the government using the, we were told that the coffers were empty when this government was coming in.
Right.
But we are finding a situation where the government is using the few resources to buy opposition MPs, to persuade using resources other people who are perceived to be in the Azimio stronghold to come on their side. You saw a clip that was circulating in the social media the other day, or when there was, I think there was a celebration of PS Omolo homecoming. You saw that youths were being bought. Now, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, where are these resources coming from? And yet you claim that the coffers were empty.
Right.
So, Richard, I think we need to call the government. We need to call it out. as opposition.
Right.
And I think the opposition is doing very well on that side. I would rate it very high. And you know, we were treated to a lot of bravado when the president was saying that we want these people to put us in check, to put us in our toes. And he was interested to find out when we'll be holding demonstrations.
Right.
Now here are the demonstrations, and you want to suppress them.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, Senator Oburu Oginga is saying, where does Ruto get the power to call off demonstrations?
Yes.
We don't need your permission to come out and demonstrate. And you've pointed out there, the president was quite, excited in his opening speech when he was taking over power last year, saying, he's looking forward towards being put into account by a vibrant opposition, which is probably now more vibrant than you would have thought. But let's talk about what the Article 37 of the Constitution says about these demonstrations which we are expecting. And then we can get to speak about human rights as well as the role of the police in handling this scenario. Article 37 of the Constitution, you can also read it yourself on page 5 of the Daily Nation. It provides for freedom of peaceful assembly and states that every person has the right peaceably and unarmed to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petitions to public authorities. This right can only be limited by law, and then only to the extent that the limitation is reasonable, justifiable in an open and democratic society. Under the Public Order Act, an assembly may be stopped or prevented when there is clear, present, or imminent danger of a breach of the peace or public order. There are two questions here, Mwalimu, that maybe we can take a look at as we speak about this protest. At least 23 people have been killed in this nationwide protest so far. This is bloodshed that should be, as the nation says, enough is enough at this point.
And we have condolences to the family.
Of course, condolences again, right, to those families of the 23 people who've been killed so far. One life is one too many to lose for any kind of struggle or any kind of civil unrest as the one we are witnessing here. But there are two questions to ask here, Mwalimu.
Yes.
One, is the opposition providing notice to the government? And if they are doing so, a show of force by the government, how can this be handled in a way that we don't see a loss of lives by the police, or we don't see the opposition, destruction of property by the opposition claims that it's the government that is sending goons, but whether this is true or the other is true is still up for debate.
Yes.
But we still have two facts on the table. We are losing lives from one end, which is purely police officers who are shooting down people who are in this demonstrations, that is protesters. No protester has killed a Kenyan or has killed a police officer, but there's that destruction of property as well. Is there a way to find balance? The police can be able to protect the citizenry, but also the citizenry does not overreact in this kind of scenarios, if I can say it's an overreaction.
Okay, let me begin by saying that first of all, we are reminding the police or the law enforcement agencies, because they are our brothers and sisters. We are reminding them that they are suffering in the same manner that we Kenyans are suffering. They are not special, they are not unique, and the only thing that they have been given is a responsibility and a duty to maintain law and order. Now, when it comes to us who are in Azimio, I would like to challenge the government. The Constitution is very clear, and not unless they have suspended the Constitution, I would like the government to come out clear and cite situations whereby we have, number one, we have, the Constitution, Article 37. Where have we, because the Constitution is very clear, where have we prevented or where have we shown imminent danger or a breach of a peace or public order if they cannot be in a position to do that? And now, you find that one is making it so difficult for people who are in Azimio to keep on telling the government when precise areas where we are going to demonstrate, where we are going to assemble, because they are using the same information to hurt the people who are protesting. So you find that what we are doing in Azimio, we are giving one singular notice that is effective countrywide, so that because the government has shown us that the more we give them information about our plans, the more they use it to inflict harm in our coalition. So we don't have an option but to give one notice of a demonstration. And in that case, our leader, the former Prime Minister, has been very clear, together with the Deputy President of Azimio, Her Excellency Mother Karua, that we are going to protest in a peaceful way. But the government has on many occasions hired goons to come and cause violence, to cause division. You saw the other day when I think it was Dennis Itumbi made a tweet, and you saw goons invading the farm of who was the former president. Then you saw the other day he made another tweet, and the same case applies to senior government officials. Moses Kuria, you know, made a tweet that has the potential of dividing this country and taking this country back to where we have come from, where we would not want to go. So we have not seen any action from the government side. So these are people who are preaching water and taking wine.
That's true.
For us, we are going to maintain peaceful protest until when the police come and lobby tear gas to us, until when they come and shoot innocent protesters.
Right.
Yes.
Let's compare this information that you're giving with what is there on the standard.
Yes.
At the front there's pressure on former president, immediate former president Uhuru Kenyatta over this Azimio protest.
Yes.
And now speaking a few days ago, National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah and his Senate counterpart Aaron Cheriot called on the IG to investigate all acts of criminality during this protest, arrest perpetrators and charge them. According to them, it is not just the violent or called violent demonstrators who should be prosecuted. The financiers and the mobilizers of this, what they're calling them criminal gangs, should be charged with the various crimes that their money procures. Should also this be a conversation at this point? Is it about who is funding what, or who is involved in the back of this demonstration, or is it just purely about, should we focus purely on what Kenyans are needing this protest to bring out as a result?
Richard, let me tell you one thing. You have been in this country for long enough. We know these are diversionary tactics. What the government is trying to do is trying to make the complaints that Kenyans have, the demands of Kenyans and their grievances, to appear as if it's a Raila. You know, where does the former president come in when Kenyans are demanding for lowering the cost of unga? Where does the former president come in when Kenyans are demanding that, please, we are hurting, don't increase the taxes? Where does the president come in when you are hiring more CSs, more PS than it's even required? So, as I said, it's a failure of leadership. These are diversionary tactics, and Kenyans ought to ignore such tactics and continue making demands for what is rightfully theirs. Yes.
Right. So the price of unga is going up, but I don't see how that involves former president Uhuru Kenyatta.
Of course.
There are new taxes in the finance bill. I have not seen former President Uhuru Kenyatta's name there, and that's rightfully so, because the government has also protested a letter from the United Nations, which is pointing out that there have been gross violation of human rights in this peaceful demonstration. This is according to what the United Nations observed as peaceful demonstration, but saying that protesters have been killed. However, on the side of the government, they have also protested that, saying that they have not been peaceful demonstrations and that police have appropriately, and I'm just quoting them by their own terms, that they have appropriately handled this protest. We see a situation where, even the government of the republic, the government of the day, does not heed to any observation by the international community, which is, of course, here now specifically speaking about the United Nations. If I am a normal Kenya taking a look at this, and I was hoping for any hope or any sort of help from the international community, it seems there's also resistance from the government to even admit of its own wrongdoing. Now, speaking about justice, how should we pursue justice when it is at that point? I know we're going to touch about the Finance Act as well, which now we have a parliament which isn't answerable to the people and is being used as a manipulative tool. So if we pursue the direction of signatures, as Azimio is seeking to do, we'll hit we'll hit a very difficult situation in Parliament where this doesn't proceed any further. If it's the United Nations, the government is saying we are just handling it appropriately. These are violent demonstrators. How should the Kenyan, these 23 people, 23 families of the 23 people, how should we pursue justice in such kind of a scenario?
Okay, thank you, Richard. I want to begin by inviting the UN and the UNHCR and all the bodies, are including the African, the AU, actually, the African Union, to pay attention to the events that are unfolding in the country. And one thing is going to come out very clear. We have the government, which is armed, which has the resources, and that they are using those resources to attack the very people they are supposed to protect. So the UNHCR, you saw the other day, they gave caution and they said that they are monitoring the things that are in the country, and we want to invite them to take stock, because we do not know what might happen in the protest. The kind of plans that are there in the government, we have seen a government that is capable of anything. So let the UN take note. Then the other thing I want to mention is about the state capture. You saw the ruling that was made by the Supreme Court of Kenya, and you saw even the terms and the words that were used, they are totally ones which we do not expect from such institutions. And to this extent, we can say that the government or the judiciary is blowing hot and cold, because we have seen them call out the government when it tried to impose the punitive taxes. We have seen them call out the government when it tried to bring in the CASs, and therefore as much as we are gaining some trust in the judiciary, we are not fully persuaded that the local the local courts and the local justice system can give justice to the victims. And that is why we are inviting the UN and the ICC, all of them, to pay attention, keen attention to what is unfolding in the country. Because when you go to Parliament, which is supposed to, be checking the excesses of the executive, you have seen that Parliament has been completely, it's just a rubber stamp, a mouthpiece of the executive, so that such that whatever the president wants, he will have his way. And the members of Parliament, we have seen in many occasions, they are too afraid to say no, and to tell the president that the country is headed in the wrong direction. And you ask yourself why. When you look at the country, it would be in the interest of the president to lower the taxes. But why is he not doing so? Because he is being controlled by external powers. The IMF, the World Bank, they want to control what is happening in the country. And in many cases where we have seen government acting at the whims of those Western powers, those regimes are failing. And therefore, I continue to persuade my fellow Kenyans let us continue demanding, let us continue protesting.
Right.
Yes.
On page 7 of the Daily Nation, Ruto's camp,
Yes.
there's information here which has been received by the Nation, insiders from the Kenya Kwanza side, who are now providing emissaries to rope in National Assembly Minority Whip and Azimio spokesperson Professor Makau Mutua and other top government officials in the security sector to lead the talks in a timeline of September 1st. So there seems that the Kenya Kwanza administration is trying, according to the sources here that you can also read on page 7 of the Daily Nation, is trying to secure a deal with the opposition to end this anti-government protest. Let's speak about this kind of bipartisan talks which
Yes.
were called off earlier.
Yes.
In a situation where President William Ruto gets to have a sit down with former Prime Minister Raila Odinga,
Yes.
there are several issues which will be brought up on the table. Not only the high cost of living,
Yes.
there is the issue of the reconstitution of IEBC,
Yes.
and the issue of election result and electoral fraud. And I have to say this, sometimes when we have these discussions, or when former Prime Minister Raila Odinga speaks of the high cost of living and then points out on the server and the IEBC issue, we see a sort of a kind of freeze from people who feel like these are not issues that should be there on the table.
Yes.
But these are very important issues that should not be depending on an election cycle to be brought up as a discussion on the table.
Yes.
So we do expect and we do hope, I think I'm also speaking from a personal point of view, I do hope that all these issues can be tabled once and for all. From your angle, Mwalimu, what do you envision a discussion between the opposition and the government? What will you envision as the best outcome? What will you envision as the discussion would, the direction the discussion will take for the best outcome?
Okay, let me say this. As we speak, the government and the president is in a very tight corner because these are the same people who demonized the handshake. They say that the handshake is a bad thing, that the government and the opposition should not work together. And the only reason that handshake was demonized, it is for political reasons. But now, we have seen in the country in the past, 2007, 2008 is one good example. It is only dialogue and the mediation that restored peace and sanity in our country. The position where we are in as a country, it's only dialogue and mediation that can help us through out of this crisis. But the people who have the responsibility, the high responsibility falls on the government. It is upon the government to call the opposition or the Azimio. And then, as for us as Kenyans, we do not want positions to be created. And in fact, Azimio has been so clear. What are the demands of Azimio? We want, first of all, election justice. There are issues that are hanging, the opening of server, because if the government believes that it truly won in a free and fair manner, then they should not have any problem opening the server. The other issue is on the IBC issue. Azimio is saying, stop appointing your own referee. For us to have a fair game, let us sit together and come up with the IBC commissioners. Then the cost of living. The government is saying, at this juncture, you cannot increase taxes. You cannot introduce housing levies. You cannot raise the VAT from 8% to 16%. Now, everyone, including the mama bogas and the boda people who are at the center of the campaign in Kenya Kwanza, all of them are complaining because they are stuck what the government promised and what is delivering. So it is so simple for the government. You are the one who has the instrument of power, you have the resources, you are collecting the taxes. Come to a negotiation table. Let us, we in Azimio, table our issues, which are very clear, and then the government will see what it can deliver. And when I look at the checklist of Azimio, it is possible to deliver in all those areas that are being highlighted.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, let's speak to the role of citizenry, so that we know we've been moving from the government to the opposition.
Yes.
And now let's speak about the people.
Good.
As we round up this discussion on the planned 3-day protest marathon,
Yes.
A marathon protest, as I would like to call it, from tomorrow through to Friday, the super wealthy, Mwalimu, have protection. Not the middle class, not the poor. The businesses that are going to be destroyed or closed down are not by the wealthy who are living in the leafy suburbs of Nairobi or in whatever region.
Yes.
Those ones have dogs, they have high walls, they have well fenced and well put up electric fences, they have security personnel, and the poor do not. Those who are in the streets, those who would like to go to the streets, are a normal mwananchi. Those who will die, and hopefully no one continues to, they will be poverty-stricken family members of someone who suffer from, some of those economic issues that we seek to highlight in this show. There has to be more than the Constitution, Mwalimu. There has to be more than what the Constitution provides for the right of protest, what the Constitution provides for protection, what the Constitution provides as the role of government. We are aware that the Kenya Kwanza government says they won the election free and fair, which was also ratified by the Supreme Court. So they have the right to thumb their chests and say, we won, give us 5 years, and this is rightfully provided by the Constitution.
Yes.
And the opposition is also saying the same. But the reality is that a normal mwananchi, as you began by saying, is caught up in between these two issues. So there has to be more than constitutionalism. We do not need a messiah. We do not need a savior. We need the reality to be in check with what we are experiencing on a day-to-day level.
Yes.
What should a Kenyan watching these two scenarios react, and how should they proceed in the coming few days?
Okay, let me begin by saying this. Actually, it is true. According to the courts, according to the Supreme Court ruling and the IEBC chairperson, Kenya Kwanza won. But still, that does not mean the people stop exercising their power. Because the power that is, you see, with the president and his deputy and all leaders in various capacities, that power has been donated to those leaders by Kenyans. And Kenyans have, at any given time, the liberty to recall these leaders. What we are seeing today in Kenya is that power that is guaranteed by the Constitution. Article 1 of the Constitution, it is the one which is being exercised.
Mm-hmm.
Now, today, and I'm speaking this as someone who, as a young man, a youth who comes from the Mount Kenya region, we are in a we are in a dilemma. Let me use that word. Mm-hmm. Because our people have been brainwashed to think that pointing at a problem, highlighting what is not working, protesting is a wrong thing. And the people who do this, they do it at their own personal interest, because they don't want our Wajiko, they don't want to deal with our Wajiko who is awakened. They want someone who has been suppressed, someone who is intimidated, someone who think that always the government will serve in his or her best interest. And sometimes when power enters into some of these people, they tend to misuse it. And it is therefore upon Wajiko to detect that we are in a situation where the government is misusing its power, and then they exercise their power. Then I would also like to mention something that pertains with the hustlers, as you had mentioned them, the common Wanjiku. You saw the last campaign was full of divisions and the class wars, the dynasties versus the hustlers. It is neither here nor there. Instead, what the government needs to do, it is to empower Wanjiku, because you cannot enrich a country by lowering or by destroying the rich. The role of government is to create opportunities for all, to empower the youth. But what we are seeing is the rich are being fought for political interest and for political purposes. Today, we are seeing the youths from Mount Kenya being branded as Mungiki. And you ask yourself why? Because they are afraid. The promises that they give during campaign, they never talk about them. During campaign, you are told this will be a government of Mama Mboga, a government of Boda Boda, and the lower class. If you look at the picture, starting from the top, in the cabinet, there is no single representation of a Mama Mboga. There is no single representation of a Boda Boda. Coming down, even to situations where the government could have given at least few youths, the CAS. We saw the government went in the opposition strongholds and they collected some political rejects and gave them those seats.
Actually, the latest of the appointments at the Commission of Revenue Allocation is an appointment of the wife of the former IBC chair, Chebukati.
That is what we are talking about.
Right.
So, let us stop the diversionary tactic and let the people continue exercising their power without any intimidation.
One very last question there as we drop that section for people to go and read more in what is there in the dailies. I have a question about now the role of the citizens.
Yes.
Do we learn Mwalimu or are we plain gullible people? Because these are conversations we've been having since 2007. No one is unaware of the repercussions of the civil strife that happened in 2007, 2008, 2017, a few cases here and there. Last year, there were also a couple of cases, but it seems that repeatedly, when we get back to an election cycle, we seem to forget. And then after we've done our democratic process, we come back and point fingers to these leaders for 5 good years or for 4 good years. And then it seems that in that very last year, we have some sort of memory loss. We have lost a recollection of what exactly happened in the past, and now it seems like we are in a very new, different country. And then we do repeat this after every 5 years. What is our role as a citizen of the Republic? We condemn corruption, but we immensely practice it ourselves on the ground. We condemn our leaders, but continuously in our institutions of higher learning, in our roads with police officers, in our homes, we practice corruption through and through. We claim to be religious people, but when it comes to issues of fact and reality, the lives of Kenyans involved, the cost of living, it seems our religious selves takes a backstage. We have seen cases of the government carrying sacks of money to churches, and nothing is said against this. What is our position in all this fight without involving the opposition, without involving the government, as we do round up that section?
Okay, let me begin by saying this, Richard, because you've pointed out about how our religious leaders have, they have taken sides in politics, which is not supposed to be the case, and then the gullibility of Wanjiku. It is funny to say, and I'm a Kenyan saying this, that we do not learn from our mistakes. And if we truly learn from our mistakes, then we could be seeing a different crop of leadership in the country. We keep on repeating the same mistakes and expecting to get different results. And you find that you've described that as a memory loss, which I agree with you 100%. The kind of forgetfulness that we have in the country, it is created in such a way, it favors a very few people in our society, and at the expense of the majority, the larger citizen. Because people and societies get the kind of leaders that they deserve. What we are getting today, the likes of Moses Kuria, the likes of Dennis Itumbi, these are the leaders that you deserve. It is not the first time that Moses Kuria is being convicted or is being accused of the derogatory remarks and the kind of abusive language that we do not expect from a leader. But what happened? When Ruto came into power, he gave him a CS. And then we have to ask ourselves one question as Kenyans. Some of these top people in the government, do they really merit the kind of seat that they have? Do they have the qualification? Do they deserve some of those seats? We have seen a whole CS in the country, and I'm not saying that academic success amount to doing well in life, but there is a connection between academics and leadership and delivering. A whole CS confessed to having gotten, I think it was an E, and I'm not condemning the people who get E. But why do you want to reward failures in government? Does it mean out of the 50 or so million Kenyans, we do not have people who are qualified to get some of these roles? Because once you fail in leadership, you fail in everything else. Now, coming back to religion, because you had mentioned something about religion. Religion is supposed to be a place where everyone comes without being seen as from this coalition or from this side of our politics. But in our country, as we speak today, we are seeing that religious leaders have a role to play and can be accused of the situation that we are in as a country. What was happening, remember, during towards the election, politicians were moving from one church to the other, giving millions of money, and then these leaders were whipping the masses to move or to vote in a certain direction. The same leaders, we are seeing them today pointing fingers to the government, telling the government that it's failing, and yet they are the ones who failed when it mattered most to give direction and to sanitize the kind of politics that we have in the country.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Mwalimu. But if you can get to understand the state of the nation a bit more, get yourself a copy of the Daily Nation. Enough is enough. Page 17, a continued statement on that memo, and much more on page 4 and 5 on what the country's fate looks like in the hands of 5 men: President William Ruto, Raila Odinga, Interior CS, Intelligence Boss Haji, and Police Chief Japhet Koome. On the Standard, page 4 and 6, you read about the pressure which is mounting on former President Uhuru Kenyatta and accusations that he is part of the financiers of this protest. Whether that is true or not, it does not take away from the fact that, as Mwalimu keeps saying here, common Kenyan is suffering. It does not matter who has the moral or legal high ground at this point.